Hey Book Dragons, I'm really glad you're able to join me today. I've got a book review for you, and this is a series of books, or rather, a six-part series that makes up one book. And I ran across this on Amazon just randomly. One day I was looking at books and it popped up on my radar, and it is called The Boy in the Iron Box by Guillermo Del Toro and Chuck Hogan. And I read a little bit about it and I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty interesting. And I knew Spooky Month was coming up, so I decided, well, I'll just grab those for my Spooky Month reads and try something new. And I'm actually really glad I did. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. It's been a while since I just randomly picked a book to read that I've never heard of or known anything about, so I was pretty excited to read this. And so yes, it's a book, it's basically altogether the length of a novella, but it's broken down into 6 different segments. So it's a series, essentially, that makes up one book. And so let me give you a brief rundown of what it is. The story follows a group of Russian mercenaries, kind of like a Black Ops team, and they're going on this mission undercover, and it's basically radio silence. They can't communicate with anyone. They have signals that they can send out when the job's completed or when they get to certain markers in the job. And the story starts out with their plane going down into this frozen wasteland, and the team itself survives, but the pilots don't. They're pretty much dead on arrival. And so they salvage what they can from the plane, and one of their team has seen what seems to be a housing structure a few clicks back. So they retrieve what they can from the plane, and they go off in search of this dwelling. Once they get there, it's a very strange looking dwelling. It's almost like a castle. It reminded me of a castle, but it almost feels like a maze as well. There's concentric rings and things like that. And they set up base camp in the castle and try to decide where they're going to go from here, how they're going to get home. Are they still going to try and complete the mission, that sort of thing. One of the team members ends up deciding to explore a little bit, and he finds this hidden room with a crevice in the floor, and there's an iron box in the floor. And curiosity gets the best of him, and he opens the box, and there's this boy that almost looks like a mummy. And that's all I'm going to tell you about that, because all hell breaks loose from there. It's a wild ride throughout the course of the story. Some of the teammates end up missing, and their bodies are later found mutilated. It's just this wild and crazy thing, and they're thinking that one of their comrades was the murderer, and it's just a whole messed up ordeal. So what did I like about the book? I really liked how fast-paced and engaging it was. It had me on the edge of my seat constantly. I was just really engaged. The pacing was really good. I felt like I was immersed in the story. And what little time we get with the characters, it's a novella. You don't expect to get a whole lot of time with the characters. But we're given enough information about the characters to feel like we have buy-in into what they're experiencing, right? And there's a little bit of lore about the boy in the iron box that we learn over time. And it's not a spoiler when I talk about the boy in the iron box, because that's literally the name of the story. So, that's not a spoiler. There's a boy in an iron box. But it was just really fun, really tense. There was a lot of tension, a lot of suspense, and some pretty horrifying things happened. So I will say that even though I enjoyed that, for those of you who are a bit more squeamish, it may not be for you. I'm just throwing that out there. but I really did enjoy that part of it. It gave me some Lovecraftian vibes, and I know Del Toro is a huge fan of Lovecraft to begin with, so I was not surprised by that. It started out kind of feeling like a vampire story, but then it kind of morphed a little bit into combining that with elements of necromancy and mind control, things of that nature. So it was a really unique take on some of those classic horror tropes, and I just had a great time. It definitely gave me the same kind of vibes that I've come to expect from other stuff from Del Toro, like Pan's Labyrinth and Cabinet of Curiosities. If you've watched that on Netflix, that's also created by Del Toro, and it gave me vibes like that. There was some pretty horrific stuff, and that's just what I've come to expect from Del Toro, and it was perfect to start off Spooky Month with. I read it in one day. That's how fast-paced it was. It actually only took me about 5 hours, but because I was working in between that's why it took me so long to get through it. You could probably get through it in 4 or maybe even 3 hours. It's that quick of a read. So I definitely enjoyed myself. If there's one thing that I would say I didn't like, and it's not even a strong dislike, it's more of something I'm on the fence with, and that is the ending. It didn't end like I really wanted it to, although it's definitely a unique, twisty ending, and I see why he did that. He was trying to be a little bit different, not give you the standard happy ending. But, I mean, it's a horror story. You don't necessarily want a happy ending anyway if you're looking for good horror, right? I mean, you do hope that people escape in the end, but, different endings for different folks, different strokes for different folks, I guess you'd say. So, I don't know. I'm still sitting with the ending, and it is growing on me a little bit. So I'm not going to say it's a strong dislike. It just wasn't my preferred ending, I guess we'll say that. So, overall, what did I think of the series? How does it rank? I highly, highly recommend this series. Definitely read it once, and you may want to read it over and over again. I borrowed it through Kindle Unlimited, which is great because I don't know if I'll reread it, but I definitely enjoyed it. It goes in my shiny tier. Not the best of the best, but definitely not something I disliked. And I really rather enjoyed myself. It was very, very shiny. So I'm so happy I read it. And I would recommend it to anyone who likes graphic horror. If you've watched some of Del Toro's movies and creative exploits, and you're familiar with him and you like what he puts out, that definitely means that you will probably like this series, at least to a point. And it makes me want to check out Chuck Hogan too. I'd never heard of him before, and I figured, well, maybe he's worth checking out as well. There have been other books of Del Toro's that I've wanted to read that I just never have. I think he's got a book called The Strain that seems interesting. So we'll see how that goes. I'm really hoping to explore more of his stuff. And let me know in the comments, guys, if you've read this series, what you thought of it. If you haven't read it before, or maybe you haven't even heard of it, is it on your radar now? Does it sound like something you'd like to read? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, make sure you read more books. I will talk with you soon. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. I really appreciate all you do to support my channel.